Okay. Good morning, everyone. Uh, on yesterday, we went back to look at Luke chapter 17, verses 11 through 19. And I won't get into detail on that, but we looked at that because it talked about the 10 men with leprosy, which we talked about in detail. We talked about the position of Jesus and all of us becoming the Word of God and walking in the midst of a religious setting and those who are trying to fit in, those who have no home, and those who are trying to find truth. And so we looked at those distinctions, and we looked at Jesus healing the 10 lepers and what that meant as far as there being no vibrations in the earth, there being no rhythm in the universe for man because of religion. And symbolically, that meaning the whole congregation, meaning the whole earth, or all of religions in the earth, and the one that turned around being significant as well, because it only takes a tenth to change the consciousness of the whole world or all the land. So we went into that in some detail, and but most of the day we talked about some of the questions and concerns we had from Monday, and trying to address people's concerns and relating everything that we study into scriptures where we are now and what it means. So we did that yesterday to offer some encouragement and to look at we are in a good place. We are following truth and hopefully offer a little encouragement. And that's where we were with that. But I just wanted to see if there are any questions, if everything was answered yesterday. Have any questions from yesterday or for anything for that matter, please feel free at this time. And if I forgot anything that we discussed, please feel free to add that as well. Anyone? Okay.
I'll go on. Good morning.
Okay. Good morning.
I thought it was kind of profound in our discussion of the lepers, and how we talked about how leprosy really numbs the nerves in your hands and feet, so that your fingers and toes just sort of curl into themselves, and they look like they fall off, but they don't actually. But the numbing of the hands and the feet were what really caught me, because as you said, when we talked about how when we know a truth, it resonates with us. But the 9 lepers that went back to the priest to show the priest were more interested, well, this is my interpretation, were more interested in getting back into religion and being in the good graces of the priest. Whereas the one who didn't go to the priest, but instead went to Jesus, he was just profoundly affected, and he knew what he knew, and he didn't need the blessing of the priest, because he knew that what he heard resonated with him. And he believed it to be the truth. So the fact that religion can cause kind of numbing to the truth which is what I thought was very profound in making the analogy with the leper. The fact that religion can numb us to the real truth so that we don't, sometimes even when things resonate with us, we just sort of wave them off as just, oh, the Holy Spirit got me or whatever. And then we go back to whatever, our usual stuff. But I just thought that was really profound to make the analogy of the leper and the numbing of the hands and feet versus, and then them going back to the priest versus the one that came to Jesus. And the fact that it doesn't take, and the fact that, as you said, it was a tithe of sorts that would reap a lot of benefits. Anyway, I'm done.
Thank you, Audrey. Yeah, that beautiful observation. And yeah, the key to that is the tithe opens up so much to us. Not only does it talk about wholeness and completion and joining all of mankind and really changing the consciousness of the earth, it tells us the importance of tithing and who we are and the oneness that it brings and the rhythm that it puts, rhythm position that it puts you in the universe. And this is doing it when you move to the place of growth, and you're doing this for the reason for not just for self but for mankind. So the tithing is, I want the priest to stay free so that he can do priestly things. He should not have to worry about these things. So the tithing is not just for you, it is for the benefit of mankind. And it keeps the universe in rhythm, and it also creates space so that enlightenment can be brought into the earth, fresh enlightenment can be brought into the earth. So, yes, I agree with you. Thank you. Anyone else?
I have a question. Ron.
Okay. Yes, ma'am. Go ahead.
So, if you're tithing in the religious setting to someone who is not feeding you soul food, but giving you junk food, what does that open up? More chaos in your life? Or more chaos spiritually?
Okay. Although this is addressed to me, I would like others to answer, especially you, Pastor Phil, or if you have I know you have an answer. But I think the difference in tithing is your intent. I think there are people out there that genuinely have a good heart and want to see God and may not know better as to where they are, that they may think that this is all there is to it as they sit in their settings, and somebody help me with that if I'm wrong. So I don't see them as casting any darkness upon themselves by being there if they're entering the tithe with the right intent. Do you agree with that, Pastor? Or anyone else who wants to talk on this?
I do. I think that intent plays a major role in tithing. But the question is this: if you've been taught the advantages of tithing, the purpose of tithing in terms of freeing the priest for the purpose of enlightening humanity, then what happens when you know better but you still don't do it? If it's intent and you know what the purpose of the tithe is and you don't do it, then what happens? It opens you up for confusion. It makes it more difficult for you to understand enlightenment or embrace it. You can hear it, but you don't know what to do with it. It's not that you're paying for it, it's that you're being obedient. And the scripture clearly says that obedience is better than sacrifice. So, why is it so difficult to get people to tithe when they know the purpose of it? Example. Before I understood what tithing means, it was not difficult for me to get the people I was covering to tithe. However, when we started seeing the light of what truth is, it's like people just stopped tithing. As long as they were in church in a religious setting, that was the easiest thing in the world to get them to do. Not only was it easy to get them to tithe, but it was also easy to get them to pay into programs and to pay for choir anniversaries and revivals, etc. However, again, the moment that we left religion, tithing became obsolete to them. And it was almost like they didn't care anymore. It's like the priests can live off of air while they live comfortably without having to experience any of the difficulties that life brings when you don't tithe. And I want to speak a moment to what Audrey said as well. The lepers who were going to the priest to show themselves, and the one who went back to Jesus, as she said, that tithe, that tenth, it resonated, so they didn't go back. They knew they didn't have to get the approval of the pastor or the priest. So it wasn't that they didn't recognize what happened with them. They saw the other one going back, but they refused to because they wanted to be accepted. And that was no different than a dog returning to its vomit. Now, if there are any questions about either one of those things that I have spoken to, please raise them now, or comments.
Well, Pastor, I got the part where you said, when you know better, you do better. Too much is given, much is required. But what if the preacher or the pastor don't teach what the tithe is for? Does that causes confusion?
Everything he does causes confusion if he doesn't know any better. If he doesn't know, it's not because he can't know. It's because he does not seek to know. He goes by what he's been told. What we have been told, especially as pastors, is you tell them to render the tithe because they go get a blessing. That is not what the reason for you rendering the tithe, unless you see enlightenment as the blessing. However, we know that is not true. What we have been told the blessing are those things that we see with our eyes, the physical things that we receive, and that's what we're looking for. So the one who is not teaching what tithing means is one who is contributing to the confusion. Now, the one who renders the tithe because they are being obedient as opposed to trying to get something for it, they have opportunities. They are open to enlightenment. And I want to give you an example of what I'm saying. Those of us who were reared in the church, and what did we learn while we were in the church? I'd be willing to bet that 98, if not 99%, of all the people who are on this phone right now or on Zoom right now, I'll be willing to bet that as long as they were in the church, there was no problem with them tithing. Maybe the reason see what we see now is because of the obedience and the understanding of tithing. And those who are not, it's not because they don't know any better. It's because they obviously don't believe what they're being taught. Because if you believe that tithing opens you up for enlightenment and you traveling this journey of truth, then why is it that 10 cents out of $1 is more important for you to put in your pocket than it is for you to be obedient and rendering the tithe? So the people who are in the religious settings are open for that. Now, this is what I see. After saying all I've said, this is what I see. I see that when we talk about influencing those who are truly seeking the truth, and I don't mean who are seeking to know what we are teaching, but want to know the truth about who they are, want to know the truth about what the scriptures are saying. They are open, they are susceptible to what we are putting in the macro, because the tithe is like a door that opens them up. If they are doing it because they are doing it out of obedience and are not doing it simply to get a tax break, if they are doing it purely out of obedience, it doesn't matter who the pastor is. It doesn't matter what the pastor teaches. It still opens them up to be a recipient of what we are teaching because it resonates with them. Is that clear, or do you have any words concerning it, or anything further to say about that or ask about that, Evan, or anyone else for that matter?
Pastor, I'm good. Maybe someone else have a question. I'm good.
It resonated.
Yeah.
Oh, I know part of what I didn't say is that, as response to Evan, is rendering the tithe and not being fed. I heard this years ago, and I've talked about it so much, that you don't stay at the Marriott and pay the Holiday Inn. You don't eat at one restaurant and pay another. So if you are not rendering the tithe to where you are being fed, then you are actually robbing the one who's feeding you. Because if you don't pay for the stay in the hotel or the food in the restaurant, you're robbing the one who owns the restaurant or who's serving you the food or who's giving you the privilege to stay. Is that clear?
Very.
Yes, sir. Yes.
Thank you. Anyone else? Okay, Ron.
This is Barbara. Sorry.
I'm sorry. Go ahead, Barbara.
I wanted to get in, but I was talking when I had it on mute. The other thing that struck me, in addition to what has been said about yesterday, is when we talked about the fact that we talked about people going back to the altar all the time, and we don't create space. In a religious setting, you go to the altar every Sunday for the same thing sometimes, in some people. But when we go to the altar for the same thing, we are not creating space to allow enlightenment to guide us and to teach us. So that was significant to me as well. And then the final thing I think is that we can create space for negative stuff as well as positive stuff. For instance, I think, Pastor, you use this as an example, or Ron, somebody, if we say something is not going to work, well, then we've just created the space for it not to work. So we have to be careful about the spaces that we do create, because when we are open to being in rhythm with the universe, space is unlimited, and so our possibilities are unlimited.
Thanks.
May I add something to that, Barbara?
Oh.
When you talk about that, opening the making the space for positive or negative, it depends, of course, on what your thoughts are. Change does not come simply because we ask for it or seek it. Change does not come because we meditate or because we read the scriptures. Change doesn't come because we cry or because we march or do whatever. Change only comes when you change. And the change that I'm speaking of, when we change from an animalistic attitude to that of a human, then we begin to change the environment around us. We cannot expect to change if we don't put any action to what we say we believe. When we say that we believe that this journey of light is real, then we do not find ourselves running to the priest to show him that we've been delivered. When we say we believe in the tithe, we don't refrain from doing it because no one knows whether we do it or not. All of these involve change. Now I'm going to say something. Out of all the things that are difficult in our changing, why is it the hardest thing to change is our relationship with money? We would do everything else except when it involves money. 10%. Why is it we can do everything except that? Why is it that even talking about it makes us uncomfortable? For the same reason that at one time when people would say you play in the race car, that made us uncomfortable. It was for the purpose of keeping us from talking about race and racism. The discomfort when it comes to the money is because we have been taught that we have a constant life of lack. And when we do not tithe, we are saying, the Lord is my shepherd, but I still have lack. So when we overcome this material world, the God of this world that we're holding on to, which is money. And I remember Kathy taught this probably for 2 years, what it meant in terms of the love of money being the root of evil, of unrightness. In this particular case, we can see it very, very clear that the affection that we have for money renders us unripened in that particular area, which does indeed have an effect on every aspect of our lives. So we must become comfortable not only with walking away from religion, but we also must become comfortable with rendering the tithe, or become comfortable with our relationship with money. It's almost like if you lie about what's in the scriptures, you don't have to be concerned about tithe and offering. However, if you tell the truth about it, then you lose that opportunity to see a change in the people you cover in their relationship with money. It's almost like people would rather be fleeced as opposed to being taught. They would rather have the sheep would rather have the wool stolen from their bodies and soul than to be taken care of during their time of infirmity. I'm done.
It's almost like we want to pay somebody to tell us what it is we want to hear. In other words, to hear the truth is tantamount to our having to take responsibility for ourselves. And to pay somebody to tell us what it is we want to hear kind of absolves us of that responsibility, because since I pay my tithe and the preacher's preaching what I wanted to preach, I'm good, kind of thing.
Not realizing, those of us who are searching for truth, not realizing that this could very well be the holdup. The change that we are talking about, the balance. How can we seek balance and change when we are involved in what we want to have changed? And I agree wholeheartedly with what you were saying, Barbara. I would love to hear if there are any comments or questions.
Well, that's part of that's the whole principle, to me anyway, of religion. Not only are they paying for what they want to hear, those that are paying recognize and know that they are controlling what they hear. And so is the pastor. He only says what they want to hear. So it becomes a contract for confusion rather than an opportunity to hear truth. And that's the whole. That's pretty much the whole gist of it.
I'm still kind of unclear. I can't make the connection of that one being the tithe, because maybe I'm thinking monetary or something like that, but I just can't. It's not connecting for me.
It's only talking about a fraction of the whole that it takes to change the world. Look at how this one man has changed our whole conversation about everything we thought was true in relationship to these 10 lepers. When we look at the scriptures, there are always numbers involved. The 12 sons and one daughter of Jacob and Ishmael. The two sons of Isaac. Numbers are always involved. And the numbers that are involved mean something. It is easy for us to talk about the 12 sons of Jacob and of Ishmael, without talking about what 12 means. If 12 speaks to government, and it does, then what it's talking about, the seed of government comes from spiritual completion, or at least it's supposed to, because 12 is 2 in 1, which is 3, which is completion. And in order for that government to be balanced and to do what it is supposed to do, then that feminine energy becomes its guardrails to make sure that it does what it's supposed to do in relationship to everyone. And that guardrail, that femininity, is that daughter, the one daughter, and the 12. So it speaks to the idea of the completion of government then only when it is kept within the boundaries of the Shekinah, so that everyone can benefit from it. When men are the ones, or when masculinity does what it wishes and uses its authority to dominate and to relegate the feminine to being a servant as opposed to being a protector, it is at that point that everything falls into disarray, and we end up with a society as the one that we live in right now. Does that help you, Ms. Evelyn?
It does, because after I asked the question, it had already resonated with me. Y'all had just explained what, it was just opening up the spiritual realm of us, of who we are and the purpose of it. I don't know why I asked that question. Maybe it was for somebody else. I don't know. But as soon as I said it and you started explaining it, it's like, duh, but I got it now. I'm sorry.
And indeed, it was probably for you as someone else, and that's the reason we encourage questions, because there are people who are not going to ask, and you are the voice for them. You're the one who raises the question for them. Everything in the Scriptures speaks to the spiritual. In actuality, what that 10 is saying is, in order for you to become human, you must recognize, you must embrace what resonates with you. The teachings of Jesus resonates with you. Jesus being, what they said to Jesus is our master when they cried out to him. So it means that they recognize Jesus as being the teacher of spiritual truth, the teacher of the principles of the kingdom. And even though they did that, they resonated, but they did not embrace it, but one did. So all it is saying is this: everyone is not going to embrace the principles of humanity, yet it doesn't mean we ought to stop. Why? Because it is the human, with all of its flaws, it is the human recognizing what being human is that changes the environment, so that those who are seeking the truth and don't realize what it looks like will begin to receive the enlightenment even while they're in those settings, because we are putting it in the macro. Is that clear?
Yes, sir. I got it.
Anyone else?
Can I speak to the other part of that, Pastor?
Of course.
We look at that, and he went from 10 to 1, and remember we said the 10 represented the whole congregation when it was 10 lepers, and the 1. So now the 1 represents the 10 and the whole congregation, because But I want to show you something. When he left, it left 9. 9 talks about finality. 9 talks about judgments and to harvest something. It talks about fruitfulness. It talks about returning to the womb or the womb. It talks about concealing something. It talks about truth, loving kindness, and duality. So, in other words, because that 1, if you look at this in a spiritual sense, that 1 turns around, that 1 has opportunity to influence the whole congregation, regardless of what that number is. So in the spiritual sense, what this is saying is the 1 that turns back, the 1 who seeks truth, opens the door so everyone else can turn back. Everyone else, duality, you have a choice. You can see loving kindness. You can see that there is truth. And though you may not understand the part about the womb, you have opportunity to return to your beginning. So it opens the door spiritually for everyone, not just in the earth, but everyone who is to come after us. this is a spiritual thing, and it is not something that is controlled or bound by time.
Right?
Any other questions or comments?
Yeah, this Angela. I just wanted that never looked at it that way. Didn't see the connection between the tithing and the enlightenment. But yeah, I do agree with being in the religious setting. There was no problem with tithing. It was done, but I just didn't see that connect that tithing could have the effect on enlightenment. I just
Okay, thank you, Angela. Any other questions or comments about that? Is this clear, y'all? I want to make sure
Ron, I
everybody's
got a question.
Yes, ma'am.
Ron, this is Jackie. Just to make sure I heard Pastor correctly when he was saying about the pastor in the religious setting, because what we're teaching and we're learning, because we're learning more, we're putting that in the atmosphere, so that takes care of them, or I guess, Pastor, help me with that. So what we're putting in the atmosphere, they're in the religious setting, so are they learning because of what we're putting out there?
What I'm saying is that they are open to it. They have opportunity to embrace it. And if that were not true, then we would be wasting our time putting things in the macro or even believing it. Now, we've seen examples of it. We put in the macro our desire for racism to be exposed. It happens. We put in the macro our desire for femininity to be respected as it was intended. We see that in progress as we speak. All of the things that we've talked about putting in the macro. Now, it's funny that we keep revisiting this thing on tithing in so many different ways. And I have been reluctant to address it as adamantly as I address some of the other things. And the reason I have been reluctant is for the same reason that the reluctancy to speak about race has existed in the past. It's because of the accusations that all pastors talk about is money and that's all they want. However, that is truth. There is a truth about tithing, and I should not be reluctant to speak the truth about it. And it may very well be, and it probably is, the last vesture of an element of change that has to be addressed just as adamantly as any other change that is necessary. So Jack, I thank you, all of you, matter of fact, for that question, but for giving me opportunity to revisit it. Questions or comments? I'm done.
Okay, thank you, Jackie. Jackie, you good?
Yes, I'm good. Thank you.
Okay. Anyone else? Okay. I want to invite you to look at something with me. this morning, and this is something I need to talk out. Okay, this is not something that I feel comfortable with at all. I think I see something here, but I don't quite know what I see, and I want to take a look at it. Let's look at Genesis chapter 3 for a minute. What I think takes place, I think we talked about Abraham and the feminine energy, which is Keturah and Hagar and Sarah and Rebecca and Leah and Rachel and the daughters of I can't remember the names now, but we talked about the significance of their roles in this and the spirituality, and we talked about it is that portion of man that is spiritual, his feminine side, his side that is willing to submit to something, and his side that is, and we talked about submissiveness because that's always been negative. And that's something, quote unquote, a manly man will not admit to doing. But the submissiveness I'm talking about is your willingness to yield to something or to open up to receive something that you find value in. And so no different than someone who decides to go to medical school, you can't go in there thinking you know all the concepts and principles of how to be a surgeon if you've never been. So you have to submit yourself in order to go through this process. It is a way of changing the mind and transforming your way of thinking. So when we talk about that on the spiritual side, and we talk about the femininity, we talk about recognizing that portion of you that you probably have in a lot of ways been uncomfortable with, at least in a religious setting. Opening yourself up and understanding who you are much in the same light that Adam did. And that's what I want to talk about because that's what we're in the middle of now. That is the one that turned around. He was opened up to see what was in him, to see exactly who he was. So what I look at here, what I think I see here, well, I'm pretty sure, I just don't know how to explain it, and I have far more questions than answers. I see the first aspect of femininity kind of doing whatever is necessary to see that the spiritual essence brings balance to a situation was not done by Sarah, was not done by Hagar or Rebecca. It was done by Eve. And so I want to kind of talk that through for just a minute. And I'm gonna start in Genesis 3 verse 1, and keep in mind, to me, we're kind of looking at this for the first time, although not really. As you know, we visit this on several occasions, but when we talk, it's been over a year since we looked at these verses, or close to it, I would suppose. And I think I look at it and I say for the first time because just based on our discussions, we are not in the same place we were a year ago. So we're looking at it with fresh eyes, and that fresh vision hopefully gives us a fresh insight. And that fresh insight shows us further who we are. And
Ron, I have a question.
Yes, ma'am.
Before you get started, I thought about the Trinity, the Father, the Son, and the Holy Spirit. And religion has taught us that the Holy Spirit is a he. So my question to you before you get started is just dealing with what you're about to go into, I believe. So is the Holy Spirit is the Shekinah. And my question to you is that Abum, the Trinity?
Pastor?
No. The Shekinah is an aspect of a room. When you look at the New Testament, that's where you see the quote-unquote Holy Spirit introduced in a different way than it was in the Old Testament. And the Trinitarian concept is it's a very old concept. And the difference is that the Trinitarian concept of old speaks to the concept of life itself and how it functions in relationship to the universe. So what happened is when the Bible was translated, it was translated by arrogant men. What I mean when I say translated, when it was translated from the Aramaic and the Hebrew, it was translated into the Greek by arrogant men who dominated everything, from the foundation of violence and relegated females to servants. So what they did, they altered the feminine aspect of a room by saying that the spirit is actually masculine. When in actuality it speaks to Father, when it says Father, Son, and Holy Spirit, is actually speaking to the man, the child, and the woman. That's what it's speaking to. The Trinity of Antiquity does not speak to the Spirit in the way that is spoken to in Christianity. It speaks to it as being the mother, because it is recognized in antiquity that the Spirit is feminine. Therefore, everything that comes into being comes through the feminine. Why? Because nothing exists in this earth realm without breath, without being birthed by breath, without being brought to life by breath. So our thought patterns in regards to the Trinity must shift to that place where they were first implemented. Also, Evelyn, and the rest of you, of course, the Trinitarian thought that we find in Palestine it originated actually in a place called Hekupata, which was translated to be Egypt. That's where it had its original origin. So, again, we must change our perspective on what this is talking about. And if we are to go forward with where Ron is headed, we must keep in mind that we are talking about the feminine aspect when we say spirit, but also we're not talking about physical beings. We're talking about spiritual concepts. Hope that helps you. Thanks.
Yes, sir. Thank you.
Anyone else? Okay. I find myself with this feeling a little uncomfortable. So if you have questions, ask, and I may not be able to answer them just yet. But if you see where I'm going or what I'm trying to say, help me out with this, okay? Okay. Verse 1 in chapter 3 of Genesis. Now the serpent was more crafty than any beast of the field which the Lord God had made. And he said to the woman, Indeed, has God said you should not eat from any tree of the garden? Now, here's the thing with this. It is no coincidence that at this point that the serpent goes to the feminine aspect of the man. He goes to the spiritual part of the man, and that's the question that's been on my mind. Why does the serpent go to the spiritual aspect of the man here? This is showing us, and help me out or show me what you see in this, that the human is made up of two different things. He's made up of the dust of the ground, and he's made up of the essence of the man. So, looking at this, you see this side of this, and you say this is avoiding the masculine side, and why? So when you look at this, I see, or what's my supposition of, I suppose, is that the human sees what the human was supposed to see at this point. There was no sin or darkness that had been committed. The human sees what it needs to see to be human. The purpose of the human at this point, or at every point, is to be the image and likeness of Elohim in the earth. That's the purpose. Be the image and likeness of Elohim in the earth. So God says to Moses, go down there and look on your people, because you are the image and likeness of Elohim. You are what it looks like. So to the human, nothing is off limits. And let me show you what I'm talking about. And this is where I may lose some of you, I guess. But I'm just going to read this. You don't have to go into it, turn there. But in the first chapter of Genesis, verse 5 said, and God called the light day, and the darkness he called night. And the evening, there was morning one day. Now, what I'm saying is there was no darkness. We look at that and say, well, he meant for that to be darkness. He didn't say that there wasn't a night. He's saying that there was no darkness at the time, because men, the human, understood who he was. Anything else that the human needed to understand, there was opportunity to be to understand. If you look at verse 2, it says, and the earth was formless and void, and darkness was upon the surface of the deep, and the Spirit of God was moving over the surface of the water. So there was access to spiritual things as the human needed it. But in the state that he was in, with there being nothing, no type of what's the word I'm looking for? There was nothing to disrupt the vision between mankind and the Creator. There was no need for night. So there was an evening, which was the opportunity, but there was no darkness, meaning there was no confusion. That there was no, although there was things. Well, let me back up. There were things that were unknown to him, but had not been made into confusion. Am I making sense so far?
Let me ask a question.
Okay.
If I look at that scripture where the light was called day and the evening was called night, right?
Mm-hmm.
Isn't that what you say?
Yes.
So
and the darkness was what he called night.
Darkness he called night.
Yes.
If I look at that and see a human, here is Ron. And that's Siri. Here is Ron. And Ron is light and evening, right?
Yes.
So Ron is light and he embraces the light, but then there is someone else. And that someone else is the same as Ron, but it seeks to travel a different road than Ron. And what happens is everything that is in light becomes shadowy to him. It becomes as dust dark. And the further that he travels away from what the truth is, the darker it becomes, which means that the more chaotic things become. Am I right?
Yeah.
Is
Yes.
that what you're saying?
That's what I'm saying. And here's the difference. Here's the difference. Every one of us,
Wait a minute.
including...
All right.
Yes,
Before
sir.
let me see if there are questions about what I just said, to see if others are seeing what I'm seeing. That's what I want to ask. Is there anyone who does not see or does see what the statement or the comments that I just made? Are you understanding it? If not, say so, and we'll continue to try to explain it. Is it clear?
This is Angela. I got a question. So are you saying that if I don't see a problem with, like I see a problem with something and so there's no chaos because I'm thinking everything is good, so I don't see that nothing needs to be fixed or changed in my life, so there would no... Do you get what I'm saying, or do you understand what I'm saying? I know what I'm saying. Just Fred, explain it right.
Let me see if I understand. In your life, there are things that you are dealing with. There are circumstances, right?
Mm-hmm.
And when you face those circumstances, you don't know how to deal with them. So at that point, you're in the shadows of the evening, meaning that you don't understand it. Now, if you hold on to what you believe and you continue, that circumstance may not change, but your attitude becomes positive and you see an outcome different than what you expected. That's the light. However, if you look at that same circumstance and you say, I don't know what I'm going to do, I don't even know why I believe what I believe because nothing in my life is changing. Now you are headed deeper into the shadows of it until it becomes dark. And at that point, that's when you give up. That's when you begin to say, this is crazy. I'm not doing this because nothing works right in my life. Is that what you're saying? Angela?
Yeah, and then, but then I was looking at it, if I don't see a problem, that's like, okay, if something is introduced to me and I'm thinking, okay, well, I'm doing this right, and then enlightenment comes, and then the confusion comes, now I'm deciding, well, I thought I've been doing this right, but really I've been doing it wrong. So if I'm just seeing one way and I don't see that there's a problem, but if I do see that there's a problem and truth comes in, that's where the battle begins, because now I'm seeing, okay, I thought I've been doing it right, but really I haven't. That's what I'm saying. That's when there's no confusion involved, and I'm thinking that I don't see a problem. So therefore, I'm not allowing truth to come in.
Right.
Come in because I'm doing everything right. That's what I was saying about the chaos when there's no chaos, because I feel like I don't feel like everything is going the way it's supposed to do, but I'm just using that as an example.
Right. Okay. Let's look at it this way. Where are you now? You're in this place of enlightenment, right?
Yes.
Where did you come from? You came from religion, right?
Yes.
religion is what? It's a mixture of a little bit of light and more darkness than light, which means that it represents, or it looks like the evening, right?
Mhm.
So while you are there at that space, there's enough light to keep you there. However, when you begin to see that baptism is not what you thought it was, that communion is not what you thought it was, now you have a choice.
Mhm.
To remain in that space and travel into darkness, because now you see a difference. If you remain in that space because you want to show the priest that you've been healed, or you want the approval of the pastor and those around you, that's when you begin to get more confused and travel deeper into darkness, because what you have done, you have been shown what those principles are, yet you have chosen to stay in religion, which means that you have to deny the true nature of what you have been shown about baptism, communion, etc. Does that make is that clear with you so far, Angela?
Yes.
So are you understanding? Am I hearing rather what you were saying? Is that what you were saying?
Yes.
Okay. Any other questions about?
When I heard Angela's question, I hearken back to where Ron is beginning to talk about Adam and Eve again, and it was things are just going along. They had no question about anything because they were one with everything, and it was only at the point when the serpent impregnated the Shekinah, the feminine aspect of the man, with doubt, that they begin to think about whether or not everything that had happened before was totally true. So it's like I think what I heard her say is that when you don't know the difference, and when you don't know that there's another side or a better side or an enlightened side, you think everything is hunky dory. You think you're doing what you're supposed to do. And so same again with Adam and Eve. They didn't know anything but what they knew from being created by the Creator. That's all they knew, and they didn't have any trouble. They didn't have any anguish. They didn't have any anger. They didn't have any of that stuff. They just were.
Exactly. I hope this makes sense, y'all. And I look at verse 5 in chapter 1 as the darkness is, every one of us were toddlers, and we were happy as toddlers. We were happy doing what toddlers do, but there was darkness because there was so much unknown to you. But it became known as it needed to be. It was spoon-fed to you. And we grew into the being that we are now on this phone. So the bottom line is being human is a choice. And it is the choice of giving up your choices. So without becoming human, the darkness becomes night. It becomes confusion. But as long as it's darkness, you can go back because God is guarding it for you. The Spirit of God moves on, and it is readily available to you. So that's where we are. And looking at, just a portion of Angela's example, part of it is that wrestling. I thought I've been right all along. Now, how much of this do I give up? Do I give up any of it? Now I'm starting to wrestle with it. So that's part of the serpent coming in. Okay. Questions or comments, y'all? Because like I said, I'm kind of looking at this myself and making sure I'm.
So when the serpent comes in, the serpent really shows the potential. The potential to become human or Elohim in physical form, or the potential to be animalistic in physical form. So what we are seeing then is a pattern being laid for the personality of the human, the personality traits of Elohim in physical form. This is what I'm saying. Whether we accept being Elohim in physical form or not, that's who we are. The question is, are we going to be guided by our spiritual nature and be as Elohim in the physical form, or are we going to be guided by what we see with our eyes and be as the animals of the field are, and that is the strongest survive? Those choices were built into us, because if they were not built into us, we would have no choices. And the objective is for us to embrace the light and be guided by that light that we've embraced, knowing that there are going to be evenings or shadowy times in our lives. Yet when we talk through it, or when we live through it, or when we embrace what we know the truth to be, that shadow, that evening becomes light all over again. And we have another opportunity to see the inherent powers of Elohim in human form. Yet, if we don't do that, we have the propensity, we have the opportunity to remain animalistic. The only animals on earth who make these kind of choices are humans. You say, well, what about dogs who are smart or animals? Well, that's because Elohim trains those animals. And what I mean is we have the spiritual control to train those animals. And we can fall in love and have an affection for them more so than humans, or we can recognize it as the divine power that's in us that grants us the ability to dominate without destroying. Is that clear?
Yes, sir.
Yes.
So in actuality, what we are talking about is the difference between the light of the tree of life and the tree of good and evil. So when we start in Genesis, from Genesis 1 all the way through to Genesis 6, I think it is, at least 3, what we are seeing is a repeat of how we were created in terms of the personality traits, the objective of our creation, and how we are to become human or Elohim in this physical form. And one of the things that has kept us from being able to see what we're talking about now is that we have accepted the evilness of the serpent as opposed to seeing the serpent as being a catalyst that started the process of being Elohim in human form. Had it not been for the serpent, had it not been for that serpent, the potentiality for who we are, the power that we are, then there would not have been an opportunity for that spiritual being to be clothed in skin, as is reported in chapter 3 of Genesis. Is that clear?
Yes.
So, what we're saying then is just like Rebecca and Rachel, just like they were the protectors of masculinity, they were the protectors of the desires of Elohim to bring into this earth humans, or Elohim in human form. They were the guiding forces in that after Eve did it, by virtue of embracing what had been shown by what is called the serpent. That word serpent, the fish, comes from the same root as soul too. So that it also speaks to breath. So the everything that we do in terms of traveling this journey of Elohim in physical form is instigated or initiated by some type of catalyst that appears to be what we have been taught, darkness, or appears to be something from the devil as we have been taught, when in reality it is an adversarial thought. And what is that? An adversarial thought is a thought that is different than the thought that the thought of enlightenment, or the thing that brings us to enlightenment. So that adversarial thought becomes a catalyst, just like the adversities that we face now. They become a catalyst for us to delve in darkness or travel in light. And what I mean by that is this. I have been in deep states of depression, and during my understanding of what depression, how is it expressed rather, we say you are in a deep, dark state when you are depressed. So that means that we have traveled away from the light and into the state of depression. And the only thing that brings us out of that state is light itself, someone talking to us, being our brother's keeper, that type of thing. And what happened in the garden experience, that's what Eve became. And when we see the exit from what is called the garden, the place of pleasure, the place that exists in east of Eden, which is the place of pleasure. So what does that mean? That means that set before us is a pleasant place, the space for us to be the light that we are created to be. However, it is up to us to make the decision to embrace it or not to embrace it. The garden was east of the place of pleasure. It was in front of the place of pleasure, which means that you see it. The question is, are you going to enter it? The pleasure that we enter is in knowing who we are. And the struggle is the deciphering the difference between what religion has taught us and what we are being taught by understanding the scriptures themselves. The ones who are on this phone or Zoom, the ones who are following the teachings, regardless of how they're doing it, are being given an opportunity to travel in the place to the place of pleasure, which is light, or remain in the shadows, and if they stay there, they're going to enter into a deep place of darkness, which means that they're going to knowingly enter a place of confusion because they're uncomfortable being in religious setting, knowing what the truth is. Is that clear?
Questions, y'all?
Am I traveling the road that you're traveling on? I intend to travel.
Yes, sir, y'all. I just want to make sure everybody's with us, though. You guys, does it make sense to you?
This is Vermel. Sage, could you go back and kind of expand on what you just said about the place of light and then going into darkness?
Okay, here we are. Let me put it this way. We are standing in a space of religion.
Okay.
In front of us is Eden.
Okay.
Eden is light. It's the place where the pleasure of enlightenment exists. We have a choice. We can stay within the boundaries of religion, or we can travel towards that light. And in traveling towards that light, we are going to have interludes with the chaos that we have been taught. In other words, there are going to be times in our lives when we struggle with embracing the light because of how deeply we have held on to the religious principles. And as we make that move, what we begin to see is there is nothing to go back to. Now, if you make an attempt to go back to nothing, then what you are doing is traveling into darkness, because nothing doesn't mean nothing exists. Nothing means that it has the potential for everything to exist. Like, if you can see a ball of clay being the darkness, and you're traveling in the light, and while you're traveling in the light, you see everything that exists in your life, and you're dealing with these circumstances. But now you travel back into darkness because you want to be accepted by your peers who are left in religion, in those settings. Now you're back in darkness, meaning that before you all over again is this clay. And out of that clay, you can mold whatever you want. You can become more, you can, out of it, you can make justifications for water baptism. You can justify revivals. You can justify slavery. You can take it from that clay and mold anything you want. However, you can also, from that same place of darkness, in the midst of it, there is always light. You can also mold a desire for enlightenment, a desire to understand why do these adversarial things exist. How can I change them, or am I to change them? That is the molding of desire from that chaos. And at that point, you begin to travel towards the light. And in traveling towards that light again, you begin to shed. What you're shedding is those attributes or those principles of religion, and now as you travel, there are periods when you find out that you have not been totally purged of all of it, and as you're shown that, you look for an understanding of what it really means, as we found the understanding of what baptism really means. So now we can shed that water baptism belief, and when we understand what communion means, we can shed that, and we are constantly doing that. We are constantly shedding the religious dogma that has left us in a place where we are guided by our eyes, which means that our personalities are not those of divinity, but our personalities are those of our adversary, that which is adversary to divinity, that which produces its own Elohim, as opposed to recognizing that it is Elohim. Does that help you, Vermeil, or does it confuse you?
No, that is such clarity and understanding of the concepts of all that. It was most beneficial. Thank you.
Well, anyone else? Right.
I guess I'm kind of sensing that I hope I'm not going here and losing people, and I appreciate Pastor's explanations. It does bring clarity, but I want to make sure we're all on the same page here. Anybody, if you have questions, or just say I don't understand, and let's work from there. Okay.
It may very well be. Go ahead.
What say that again, Pastor?
It may very well be that it's so much and so new that processing is taking place.
Okay. So I want to talk just for a second, and Pastor touched on it. I see what he said. I guess I see it in a simplified way that I understand it, and that's to look at the garden. What is the garden? What is this garden we talk about here? The thing when you see creation and you look at all the plants and everything that God made in the bird, all of this is talking about thought. We're talking about those intangible things that we don't give a lot of thought to, I suppose, but these are the things that make up who we are, the things that we value, the things that makes Ron and see the way I see things. And you see it sometimes when you see somebody. You ever see somebody and you say, what makes him act like that? He wasn't raised that way. Well, he has a choice as to, perhaps you're talking about molding those desires. He's molded himself, his thoughts and feelings and emotions. He's had the right to be who he wanted to be and to value the things that he wants to value. So when you look at a garden here, you talk about things that grow. You're talking about things that are that are beautiful. You're looking at flowers. You're looking at shrubbery. You're looking at trees and all of these things that the man was supposed to cultivate. So all of these things represent thoughts. They represent principles. When the scripture talks about the man, he says, I see men walking as trees. He's saying, I see men with different principles. I see men with different type of values. I see men with different types of beliefs. So when you look at this, all of this is talking about the makeup of who you are. So he says what he's saying to the human is, I want you to be the one to cultivate this. If we look at earth and ground as being the consciousness of something, it's saying that there has to be some place in the earth that the man, that the human is responsible for, to make sure that mankind can be cultivated, that he can see new things, that he can unravel the confusion. That even if he finds him placed in darkness, a good example of that is the scripture says, and Nicodemus came to Jesus by night. In other words, he came at the height of his confusion. He came at the place where he was just filled with questions with no answers whatsoever. But the moment he starts talking to Jesus, he starts to see the evening. He starts going back into day. And the reason why you see that he didn't go there immediately, it took some time, because he keeps asking questions. He says, well, how can this be? How can that be? But he's being enlightened. So this is talking about a place that you can be or be enlightened or to come to unravel the chaos. That's what the garden experience is about. Okay. Any questions or comments on this? All of this is spiritual, though. Pastor, did I miss something? I hope I
want to go back to the trees.
Okay.
When Jesus opened the man's eyes and he said, I see men as trees, right? What did he do? It says that he spat on the ground and mixed it and put the spittle on his eyes, right? So,
yes.
If that is spiritual, then what did he do? He took he took the spiritual and showed him that it was met and mixed it with the consciousness of humanity, of man, of the earth, rather, the earth consciousness. And when he put it to his eyes, he says, are you able to see it? And he says, yes, but what I see are so many different beliefs. Trees represent knowledge. So what he was seeing with was his eyes. And then once he did it again, what did he see? He said, I see clearly now. He was beginning to see man for what it was created to be. And that's where we are. Our vision is becoming clearer. We are engaged in clearing our eye. However, clearing the eye means that we have to be focused, we have to be deeply committed and desirous of having that sight. Because as we gain that sight, we are going to be faced with distractions. And when he said, I see men as trees, those were the distractions that he was experiencing as Jesus was giving him clarity. And when he got that clarity, that's when he saw men as they were to be. Some of you will remember, I shared with you, and some of you have experienced it because you've been in my presence for so long. I was in a congregation in Columbia, and this lady wore glasses. And during the course of the teachings, she came up to be delivered from wearing those glasses. And I took her glasses and asked her did she see, because there was a banner in the back of the church, the building. She couldn't read it. And I said to her, when I finish preaching, you're going to be able to see. When I finished, she came up, I took her glasses, she turned around and read the banner, and she was able to read fine print. The day came when I heard a voice, and I don't mean audibly. And what was impressed upon me is this: I have shown you what powers you have to heal. Now I'm going to carry you back and show you how it happens and the reason and why it happens. And I shared that with Posey because that's what we were doing at the time, bringing healing to people. after that, it happened like that no more. And that is when the diligent search for understanding began to overtake me. And that's when I started believing without understanding because of what I had experienced. You may ask, why was it me? Why was it Posey? Because that was our deepest desire. When I first went to Gaffney, I was sitting in a meeting of ministers, and this guy had a swollen hand, this pastor, and I asked him what happened to him, and he had hurt his hand, and I said, if you believe it, your hand can be healed. And he said, I believe it. And I touched his hand, and it was the swelling was gone immediately. And, of course, they attributed that to coincidence. Yet, it happened. So I was in a state where I had seen too much to buy into the doubt that was being sown. That was the period when I ceased to see men as trees and began to see men as they were created to be. And that is seeing men as human. And those things happen in my life periodically, controlling, ending hurricanes, dealing with tornadoes. So what I'm saying to you is this. We have that divine power, but until we make application of the teachings of Yeshua and the words of the scriptures in terms of our understanding of what they are saying, until we get to that place, we don't become the human that we are supposed to be. And we are always in a state of becoming. Out of all the things that I share with you and are sharing with you, I have not arrived. I am on this journey. I am becoming human. I am becoming who I was created to be. Elohim having a physical experience. And it appears as though the closer we get to it, the greater the struggle to stay where we are. Every step seems to be more difficult than the last. That is because the struggle is within. The struggle is between seeing men as trees and seeing men for who they were created to be. Being purged is a difficult thing. And that is the reason it is much easier to speak with someone about the truth of the scriptures who has not been brought up in church than it is to speak to someone who is steeped in religion. So what we are seeing now is that the garden, where Jesus said, heal the man's eyes, the actions of Rebecca, Rachel, Eve, etc. All of these are experiences that guides us in straying away from the desired pathway to truth. Does that make sense?
Yes, sir. It does make sense.
I would like
y'all,
if it makes sense to move on.
Yeah, y'all with us still? Anybody comment or question?
Makes sense.
I think that there is never a coincidence of what we study, especially anymore, and those that have facilitated or presented something in the last year or so. I think you will agree with me. What we do now is more of a feeling, something you experience, rather than saying, oh man, what we're going to talk about now. and searching for something in that manner. You kind of open yourself up, you submit yourself and see what comes to you, knowing that and believing that something will. And even if you haven't spoken or said anything in a while, that still doesn't mean that you don't have the thoughts that come to you. So I hope that you see the value in this and where we are, and trying to explain this is a little uncomfortable to me because I don't quite see it yet, and it challenges me because I like being in a little more in the know, whereas I don't feel that right now, but that's okay. I think as long as we're all together, we can feel this through. Okay? So, again, any questions or comments? We're hoping this makes sense.
Well, what you're experiencing is a purging. When you talk about the struggle, that's a type of.
Yeah.
We are accustomed to reading something and being able to understand it and regurgitate it. This is different. This is not something that you read from a book. This is something that you glean from your soul. And your soul is always struggling with the mind, because what has been housed in our minds is totally different than what is traveling from the depths of our soul. Therein lies the struggle. I do believe that what we are talking about right now is preparing us for something that's about to take place, and that something is going to be mind-boggling, devastating, and a joyous occasion all wrapped in one. To embrace it, it is imperative that we see that the obstacles that are the distractions, they are seeing men as trees. Our minds seem to be going in 25 different directions, and it appears as though we cannot control the thoughts that we are having and the feelings that we experience, the feelings of when these things are going to change, the feeling that we have suffered long enough. We have to remind ourselves that it is not an external deliverer that we are to depend on. The deliverer who is going to bring the deliverance is us. When we are free, everyone is free. And what I'm saying is, when we get comfortable with the struggles, when we get comfortable with not seeing it all, but knowing that it's real, that is when the invisible shackles of religion and all the other isms began to fall away. We hear the scriptures say, it's darkest before the dawn. And right now, that does not mean that we are in a state of depression, even though it is really, really dark. That means that we are faced with so many confusing things in this journey, in this life, in our environment. We are faced with economic problems. We see people, the homelessness of people increasing. We see people who work every day and cannot put food on the table. We see the upsurge of a different variant of this virus, and already they are saying that it first appeared in South Africa. No one knows where it came from, but yet the same old story. Everything that's bad starts in Africa. We see the struggles of racism in overt form as well as covert. We hear people tell us that our color has to disappear before they cannot be racist anymore. When they tell us, I'll be glad when we live in a colorblind nation, saying that my skin got to disappear. The color of my skin has to become opaque in order for you to not be racist. All of these things, all of this confusion, this is darkness that we are facing, and we are obligated to do everything imaginable and unimaginable, to process with our souls and not our minds. When we try to process with our minds, we end up angry. We end up in a state of depression. We end up trying to find ways to change things ourselves as opposed to understanding that we are the change. I ask you to take a different approach. It is one thing to say, what am I to learn from this? But it's another thing to mean it. I remember my struggles with it, and I remember that I am still struggling with it. I can say, what am I to learn from this? And there are times I still have to deal with the anger. I still have to deal with the depression. I have to fight through it. I still have to deal with wondering, is anything going to change? Why? Because I have seen legislators legislate and nothing changes. I have heard promises made and none fulfilled. I have seen all of the things that have been done in my lifetime that were guaranteeing change that never was experienced. However, I have never seen until now the explosion of what needs to be changed being brought before the eyes of the world. This is the first time that I have heard the desires of the heart of men and seen those desires, experienced those desires, birth, come into fruition. I am excited about where we are, though the excitement is difficult to hold on to. My shoulders are exhausted from carrying the burden, and I'm sure yours are too. But I remind myself, and I ask you to do the same. Because you are messianic, you can do all things. Your strength comes from the reality of your creation. Your power that's vested in you has been there before the foundation of the world was laid. Your wisdom, your understanding has always been with you, because those are substances with which you were created. Hold on to this, because these are the things with which you were created that makes you human, that makes you Elohim, having a physical experience. Thank you. And I'm done for today.
For the day?
Yeah, I can't. I don't see anything else. I don't understand. I'm empty. In terms of speaking, in terms of what I'm seeing, I'm not seeing anything else. Is what I'm saying, other than what I've said.
Okay.
I think we need to think about what, at least meditate on what we're talking about.
Yes, sir. I agree. Guys, I hope this makes sense. I know this is kind of far-fetched, a little different. And I think we're on the right track. I'm just not seeing it as clearly as I feel comfortable with trying to explain it. So, but I do see this as a good stopping point if there are any questions or comments. Anyone? Okay. And again, if there are any questions or comments, please shoot one of us an email, if you will, or let's talk it through, and I'll
Ron, a text or a phone call.
Yeah. Text or phone call. Yeah. What did I say? Email? I'm sorry. I meant text. If that's what I said. But I just the more we look at this, just seem to be something there. And again, everyone now has opportunity to look at it, and so we can be on the same page when we get back together. Okay. And I hope that's tomorrow evening at 6 o'clock. So thank you. Appreciate your attention. And again, even the conversation we had in Luke, I hope that was clear, and look forward to talking with you tomorrow. Hope you have a great day. Thank you.
You too. Thank you.
Have a great day. Bye.
Hello.
Thanks. Bye.
Have a good afternoon, everybody.